Welcome back to From Fear to Fearless Show. This show is all about sharing stories of ordinary people who have done and continue to do extraordinary things in spite of their fear. Fear is a normal part of growth and change, but for many of us, especially for children, fear becomes a factor and we have hard time pushing past our fear. Our mission for this show is to share stories of others who have pushed past their fear and have done some amazing things. So, this show is for parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles, or whoever works with children because we want to share these stories to inspire you so you can share these stories with any child in your life to influence them and impact them and help them with their fear. So today is going to be a little different. We don't have a guest today. What we are going to do is we're going to go back and look at our past guests on the show and highlight what some of their amazing things they are doing in their life and how they overcame fear or some advices that they have shared in the past. So we're going to look at Gina Riley first. Her one of the things that she mentioned is why is it important to include kids with the decisions we make? So let's look at her, what she had
At
to
the
say on that.
time before he could make choices for himself. And then when he could make choices for himself, really centering him in decisions and discussions, which I think in and of itself is a brave decision. So many times as parents, it's so much easier for us to make decisions for our kids. But when we include our kids in those decisions, there's a different outcome, right? Like there's another person's opinion to be respected and thought about and talked with.
This is really important to push past your child's fear. What is was Rena Riley was going over there. So now I want to look at. She was talking about motivation. Motivation affects our, fear is affected by fear affects motivation. So there are two types of fear, motivation, and then we want to look at one that Rena Riley went over. Can we look at that segment?
Sure. So intrinsic motivation is the joy and the energy and the excitement you feel when doing something you love.
Mm.
It is the opposite of extrinsic motivation, which would be doing something for the grade, for the money, because someone told us to, right? And when we talk about, or when I talk about intrinsic motivation, I always talk of it in terms of Dichi and Ryan's self-determination theory, which is a theory that defines intrinsic motivation. I also love the cognitive evaluation theory, which is like a sub theory of self determination theory. And that theory talks about ways that we, as teachers, as parents, can facilitate intrinsic motivation in others because we can't force it, right? We have to facilitate it. And we can do this by three things. And the first thing is competence, creating a sense of competence in our environment, right? For me, for teachers, for parents, that might mean focusing on a child's strengths, um, giving that positive specific praise to a kid, right? And saying, oh my gosh, like your handwriting is so good. Again, I'm not saying good job. I'm saying, look at that handwriting. That's amazing, right? I often get this like praise is extrinsic. Yeah, but positive specific praise is different, right? It's like way more intrinsic. And also by just providing experiences or facilitating experiences in which kids feel competence, in which they can say, I am good at this, right? And we know when a kid can say, I am good at this, whatever it is, that's the most amazing feeling in the world. And if they're good at that, then they can be good at other things too, right? So competence is really important. Um, the second part of facilitation of intrinsic motivation is giving students a sense of autonomy or a sense of freedom and choice. It's harder in a public school environment, not definitely not impossible, but harder. and more possible in more self-directed environments. But freedom and autonomy, like in a school, might mean utilizing choice texts or as a math teacher, right? Giving students like 10 questions and saying, choose five or choose three.
Mhm.
It might look like having students choose the way they do a final project. And then on the other side, in a more self directed side, once we get used to those small feelings of choice and autonomy and freedom, we can make bigger choices about how we utilize our time, about what classes we might want to take or what we might want to learn from YouTube or Skillshare or wherever, right?
Mhm.
And then ultimate freedom is just sort of like this unschooling point of view where you kind of get to design your day just like adults get to design their days and their lives. So there's that freedom and autonomy perspective that's really important. And then the last thing is relatedness,
Mhm.
right? The importance of having one person who
Mhm.
unconditionally loves and accepts you no matter what. And that's sometimes hard, right? It's easy to say, but it's really hard to unconditionally love and accept a person no matter what. No matter if you make mistakes, no matter if I think you made a stupid decision, no matter if, right, it gets scarier and scarier. But that relatedness is really important because it allows the person to feel like they can make their own intrinsically motivated decisions because someone will accept them no matter what decision they make, and that they have the freedom and choice to make that decision.
I love that episode. It's on episode 1. If you want to watch more of Gina Riley's explanation on that, but it is very important to get motivated. We need to push past our fear, and whatever those 3 things that she shared with us is amazing. So now I want to look at our episode 2 with Eddie Reether, and she was explaining to us, what is fear. Let's look at what is fear. Have her website here. Eddie, do you have something to add?
One last thought we
Yes,
forgot.
please.
Fear is a misuse of the imagination.
Nice.
Says it all.
Nice. Fear is the misuse
Misuse of
of
imagination.
imagination. Amazing. Thank you so much. Until next time, see. Yes. Fear is the misuse of your imagination. I love what she said. So now I want to look at why is it important? The early years of your kids are important, and why is it important? Let's hear what Eddie had to say.
And I discount it, or I don't value their opinion, or you just insulate yourself from those kind of damaging thoughts or events. But as a young child, and the younger they are, the more vulnerable they are to any messages, is they take it in, and that starts forming this belief system that then gets projected out to the world. And our minds and our thoughts are kind of like, the cell phone, the airwaves, and it matches up. So that's why we talk about self-confidence and self-esteem being so essential, because if I have low self-esteem, I'm giving out a negative energy, and it matches up with negative people, and it brings more harm to me. So it's almost like the rich get rich and the poor get poor. We just end up digging a deeper hole in our lives. So if
It's really important in the beginning, the early stages of a child, because they do not have the filters, like Eddie just explained. They take in any and every information that comes their way, and that develops this fear inside of them. And then now they will display the fears to overcome anything in their life. They can go ahead and move past those fears because somebody in their life or some incidents in their life has shown them or told them that they can do it. So we started forming these limiting beliefs. That's why it's really important to protect those early years of our children. So now in episode 3, I had a guest. His name is Jeffrey Fannin. He's not new to me. We have worked together to even create brain mapping for my own students and to prove my own methodology. So I wanted to, when I asked him about fear, he shared a lot of stuff about his fears as well as what he's doing to help others. But how can other people's fear influence us, and does it influence us? Let's find out. Talking about the energy and how much that other energies can influence your fear, right?
Right.
That's why sometimes it's like it's almost like other person's fear can induce your own fear.
Absolutely. And that happens all the time. We may not recognize that that's where it's coming from, but somebody else's fear can influence us. And that is the key word here, influence us, so that it will trigger the fear within ourselves. And so that we begin to be subject to their fear, even though it's not a founded fear, it's an unfounded fear.
And it happens with, sometimes I've seen it with even teachers who are not very competent in their own material. If they start teaching
Yeah.
someone with that fear of not knowing,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
can.
Been there, done that. I got the T-shirt, where the teacher might be 2 pages ahead of the students, and so they're not certain, and that becomes that subconscious belief. They are not certain about their own stuff, so the uncertainty is what is triggering. And so then the person, their energy field is picking up on that uncertainty, which is then triggering the uncertainty within themselves. And so they really don't know who they are, what they're doing, or how they're going about it. So the energy, the frequency, and the vibration becomes very important. And that's why the MP3s that we're working with in what we call the inner voice, and that's the process that produces these MP3s, so that people of all ages, it doesn't matter what you are, but your brain.
So, can other people's fear influence us? Definitely, because it does project this energy field, as Dr. Fannin just talked about, and that creates us to they influence our fear. And if you look at what Eddie said, if your child is creating these false fear systems inside of them because they don't have any filters from the beginning, they're going to start creating these facts, which are called the limiting beliefs, which are going to in turn hold them back and make keep them from making those decisions. And that's where motivation comes in. So all of this kind of ties in how, each one of them is saying different things, but how it ties into our motivation and wanting to do things. And then that's how the fear can hold us back. So why does fear hold us back? Let's find out from Dr. Fannin. Much study on human brain. Can you tell me, why does fear hold us back?
Well, I think that's probably the question we've all been trying to answer for many, many years. And why does it hold us back? Well, I think because it's an innate function of being a human being, that fear is a protection mechanism. So it's going to kick in whether we want to or not. And so when we deal with fear, we have a founded fear and we have unfounded fear. So if I'm standing out in the middle of the freeway and the cars are whizzing by and I'm afraid, well, that's a founded fear. But if I have a subconscious belief that is driving that fear, and a subconscious belief is actually a thought that we have again and again and again that gets recorded down in our subconscious. So when the thinking part of our brain says, I want to be safe, or I want this, or I want to have that kind of life, whatever it is, then it is that is an unfounded fear with a subconscious belief. So we have the ability, when we have an experience in life and we put a meaning to that experience, and then it records an emotion. So if fear happens to be that emotion that gets triggered with that cognition, whether it's founded or unfounded, it doesn't matter. It's going to just trigger whatever it is. So we have to change our subconscious belief in order to get it from that natural kind of fear that is a protection mechanism more to how we function in our daily life. So that
Absolutely, almost 100% true, because I wanted to share a quick story before we go to our next guest. Is when I came to Canada, I didn't speak English, so one of the protection mechanism I started implementing is that I'll mute myself. I won't speak to anyone at school, therefore no one will know if I know English or not. Great idea, right? So I continue to be that person, and when invisible in my classroom, I went unnoticed because I never would say a word in the classroom. So So as a child, you can see, I want to relate back to, the early ages. When I came, I didn't know who to ask for help as a child. So when I got made fun, or I thought I would get made fun of, I started protecting myself by muting myself. So we, as children, what we learn is to we do things that seems right to us, unless we have someone by our side who can say, why aren't you talking, why aren't you sharing anything, what's wrong with her. If we go unnoticed, if that child goes unnoticed, they are losing their voice, which is what happened to me for many many years. And by, when I got to grade 7 is when I really started speaking again, because my ESL teacher one day looked at me and said, I know you can speak. So as uh, Gina earlier said, having that one person in your life who can see through you and say and encourage you to do something is so important for our children. So I have many other stories like that I have done. So if you have a child in your life now, look at them. If they're doing something that doesn't seem right, or if they're being held back by fear, this is what the show is all about, is to, see those fears through them and be that person for them, to help them, rewrite those stories. Because behind every fear there was a story. Like, I've created a story that nobody likes me, nobody wants to talk to me, and if I do speak to them, they will know that I have poor English, so I better, hide behind, my, go into my shell, basically what I did at that time. So in your life, if you have a child, this is what this show is all about. So in episode 4, I met with Jackie Finneman, and then she shared, she's from the no problem parenting is her, what she does. She helps parents with parenting, and she shared us 3 steps. Let's look at what she shared.
So we've got a couple of minutes. So the first step is to seek first to understand, what's the behavior? What am I afraid of? Why am I afraid of that? What is going on around me? And for parents, I say, seek first to understand what your child, your child, the root of the behavior of the child, but also, why are you, the parent, responding or reacting the way that you are? What's triggering you to be afraid or fearful of that? Step 2 is to prepare for the worst. So think about, what is the worst thing that could happen, the worst fear. And I mean the worst fear. And then we work backwards from that. Sometimes the worst fear is, well, they're going to drive recklessly and crash. Okay, that's a big fear. So we need to talk about that. But instead of being afraid of that fear, let's figure out how we can prepare and the conversations we can have with our kiddo. There are behaviors that we dread and we're afraid of happening on a daily basis that happen day after day after day. Those are things that we can be prepared to respond to so that we don't react. Yes. And then step 3 is to change the conversation. I believe we're giving our kids too much unconditional praise, so much so that they don't believe it themselves. So I teach a lot about conditional praise first and then unconditional. So facts, conditional praise is facts. So again, if you're fearing something, what is the fact about that fear? What is true and what is not true? Right? And then what are you good at, or what is going well, or what is positive that's happening? That's conditional, a fact, not just praising unconditionally, like with the, good job, you're great, you have friends, whatever else, like the actual factual thing that the child is good at.
Yes.
And then you can pour on that unconditional. Yeah.
So thank you. So amazing. So that was Jackie's explanation about how you can help your child overcome fear. So I want to circle back to Gina Riley, when she said about those 3 things that makes that intrinsic motivation. I think it's really important to pay attention to this type of motivation, because it comes from internally from the child, and that's where the most of the fears are hidden. So in order to do that, she said, they need an environment, and they need a connection to someone, and they need to have choices. It's so important to have choices and to be heard in an environment where you can provide that. So one of the questions that I ask in the show at the end to all my guests is, what would you tell your younger self? So because we don't have any guests today, so this would be a great opportunity for me to share, what would I tell my younger self? So as I said earlier, I have had muted myself for several years, thinking that that was the best protection for me, to hide away from not knowing English. No one will know. So during those time, I missed crucial opportunities to become open or become a person who can make mistakes, because at younger age we can make mistakes. They're not mistakes, they are our stepping stones. So I kind of held myself back from all of those years where I could have made little mistakes there and here and got corrected, and that would have actually accelerated my learning of English and even being a great speaker. So that story I told myself was that, don't speak, because if you speak, people will know you don't know your English. So I told myself a story, and I told that story enough time to myself, I really believed it. I truly believe that is the fact. So that fact. So when a child is young, that's what they do. They create these stories from what they're absorbing, because we have no filters. We study the environment and we say, okay, I need to do a protection mechanism. What is that going to be? And we create a story and we say it enough time that it seems like it is the truth. Then we carry that as a truth in ourselves. That is our belief system. Then that belief system dictates what I do further in my life as I move forward. So it took for me, so many years to realize to that this is a mind game that we all play with. We have two voices, one always reasons for something and one is reasoning against something. And when we do have these stories that are created at a young age, these voices are going to fight. So I think as a young person, if I had the support, if people could have seen me as, for who I was, and and also had a family where it was we had open communication. So that was missing in my life as well. So that all added to me not wanting to try and losing all my motivation and feeling like I'm dumb. So at the end of that, all of that is a child, myself including, decided that I was just dumb. Other people had better genes to be smart, and I could never be smart. So as a young person, what would I tell myself? These are stories that we're creating. So I would like to, tell the younger people who are watching, or, parents who are listening to me, that make sure that you have an environment where your child is not creating stories. And if they are creating stories, have conversations with them so you can explore the stories they're creating, because these stories will soon become facts. And when they do become facts, they will create fear inside of them, and that will limit them from making any decisions they have to, right? So because your child is so fresh and they're not conditioned yet in any form, they don't have any filters. By giving them that environment where they can grow without fear and not make these stories, that would be an environment that parents can create. So that is, I always say, it is in the hands of the parents. As I said, I didn't have parents that knew enough about parenting or how to come to a new country and help their child um, get comfortable in a new culture, because they were also struggling with it. So we're not blaming anybody or anything. What we're trying to do in this show, my main focus is to bring these guests, like people who have gone through, like everybody, like I think Gina Riley, if you watch her show, she said that we all have fear, we do it anyways. There's not a day you're going to have no fear, right? It's always within us. But how do we overcome that, and how do we do it? And after the moment of doing that, with that fear, you feel really great because you've done it anyway. And then you have another fear that would show up. So we're going to be continuing to explore with more guests coming up next week at 11 o'clock PST, 11 a.m. PST. We'll have more. If you have any questions or if you have any comments for any of our guests, you can place them in either on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, wherever you're watching this on. So I like you to invite you to our next show so that you can ask our guests questions, because these are guests who may have had their own fears, but they didn't let the fear win. They pushed past those fears, and they were able to create and help others overcome their fears as well. So until next time, thank you for tuning into the show, even though we don't have a guest today, but we did do a review of all the guests who were on it, and they were all powerful in the way they were able to deliver how to overcome fears. And they have done it themselves as well. So again, we go live every Wednesday at 11 o'clock a.m. PST. If you're interested in making learning easy for your child, please join my group in Facebook. It's called Learning Made Easy. Or check out our website, because we do have a free Clarity coaching call with our learning success coaches, fearlesslearners.com. Or you can also go to learningsuccessacademy.com as well. Either one of them will work. And if interested in helping your child, maybe you have a child who needs more than a tutor, and you are struggling with them with either their motivation or they're not pushing past any of their fears. That's why we have trained certified learning success coaches who are able to provide you a Clarity coaching call. This is a free call, 45 minutes with them to give you clarity to help them move past where they are. So until next time, see what's on the other side of fear. Maybe you're struggling with the fear. As parents, we always do as well. I have a 15-year-old son. I do have certain fears as he grows up. So let's continue this conversation on a weekly basis so we can help each other. So my mission is to, inspire you so that you can help your children push past their fear and make fear not a factor for them. Let's help our kids learn and grow fearless. Let's influence them and impact them to see unlimited possibilities. So thank you, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 11 a.m. PST.